Day 8 of 49ers training camp is in the books. The offensive line looked better, the secondary looked really good, but the 49ers had good days on both sides of the football. Key players were making key plays, and then you got to see some really cool special teams develop right in front of our eyes as the 49ers worked more on their kickoff and kickoff return, extensive reps, getting an idea of who they value as returners and who they value to help out on this football team. There's going to be a lot of talk about, including some key injuries, players getting back on the field and starting to make an impact again. All that and more in this episode of 49ers Cutback.
From the alley-oops at Kezar to the glory days at the stick. From who's got it better than us to brick by brick. It's always the 49ers way from off-season to game day. Yeah, we talk back. It's the 49ers Cutback.
It's 49ers Cutback podcast time. Welcome to the show, everyone. It was a fun day. It was nice and cool, and the crowd was really loud. It was a fun day to be out at training camp and get to witness the 49ers continuing into block 3. So block 1 and 2 went really well for the 49ers, and we started to see some young players emerge. We started to see some training camp battles take hold. Of course, I did that episode yesterday about the training camp battles, and there's a lot going on, and it's an exciting time for the San Francisco 49ers. And what we saw was some offensive players have good days. We've seen the offensive line have a good day. But we also seen the 49ers defensive secondary continue to put on a clinic. And yes, there's no Brandon Ayuk. And yes, there was no Jawan Jennings. So they weren't exactly going against the top 49ers wide receivers besides Deebo Samuel. Now, the 49ers didn't have no success on offense. George Kittle was still making plays. We saw a lot of Trent Taylor. He had himself a good day. Ricky Pearsall continues to show that he belongs and has looked really good for the San Francisco 49ers football team. So it has been an exciting group for the 49ers. They have looked really good. And that's what you're hoping. You're hoping that the 49ers are going to consistently get better every single day. And that's what they're doing. And I thought today was really a great showing for the offensive line. I mean, really, really good. And that's what you have to have. I mean, you have to have these guys stepping up. And there's been question marks, of course, throughout training camp of whether the San Francisco 49ers offensive line was going to be good enough to consistently take care of Brock Purdy and create a pocket and allow him to be able to make the plays that he needs to make. Well, so far, the 49ers offensive line has had good days and they've had bad days. But today was one of those good days. And of course, there was a lot of players coming back from injury today as well. Either they were just getting out there and getting some work in, or they were being reacclimated to the 49ers offensive line rotation. It was fun to see. And we're starting to see some players separate themselves at some of the positions. So it's an exciting time out of practice. And of course, we're building into tomorrow, which is going to be one of the longest practices, usually in the blocks. You start breaking in nice and easy, then you go a heavy day, then you go light before your day off. So that's where the 49ers are working with. But it's going to be fun. We're going to talk about all that stuff in this episode. Please like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. I really appreciate it. If you're listening on an audio platform, 49ers Cutback on Believe, please give it a 5-star rating. And if you're going to bet with Bet Online. Bet Online is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for everything online sports betting. Right now, you can receive a 50% free bet of up to $250 on your first deposit to bet on anything from the Olympics to baseball to Formula One racing. Bet Online is every stat, every matchup, and even live odds and spreads while the games are being played. When the game's over, head on over to our online casino and get in on a game of blackjack or poker or unwind with one of our over 150 slot games. Head to the website today to get in on the action. Use our promo code BELIEVE for your 50% free bet credit on your first deposit up to $250. Bet Online, the game starts here. And what was fun about training camp is number one, you get to see players stepping up and making plays consistently. And for the 49ers, they're building to a certain point where their football team is going to be prepared to take on the New York Jets on Monday Night Football, September 9th. And that's exactly what everything is about right now. That preparation, the install continues. We got to see a lot of two tight end sets today. We got to see on defense some five-man fronts and some short yardage and goal line situations. So 49ers continue the install, continue putting in the parts of their offense that they need to put in. And then you're seeing some of the players that are involved stepping up in certain ways. Now the problem is you still have guys that are missing some of the practices due to injury, due to Veterans Days, and those things are still coming. So we know Brandon Ayuk's in the hold in. Jawan Jennings was working on the side field. I got to watch him a lot today, and he's dealing with an ankle, according to Kyle Shanahan. So he can come back at some point, and he's working through an ankle. We did see him run. We seen him stretch and jump. He didn't look like it was too bad. Christian McCaffrey had a day off. Nick Bosa, a day off. We did get to see both of them out on the practice field. Nick Bosa sporting a pretty nifty hat. So he was out there and got a lot of attention from the crowd. Curtis Robinson was on the side field. He was getting some work in, zoomed in on him and was able to see him. Logan Thomas dealing with the hamstring. That's a new one, and he's in a battle. We talked about this yesterday. That's the thing. Eric Saubert is looking good. Eric Saubert made a couple more plays today. He looks like right now he's tied in two, barring something from Logan Thomas, where Logan Thomas can step up and step into that role. So this is something that Logan Thomas hopefully can get through, and he can get out on the field because he's in a real battle to be able to be one of those tight ends for the 49ers. Of course, we know about Garindo, and then you got offensive lineman Jarrett Kingston, Aaron Banks, who's dealing with back spasms, but Kingston and Banks both came back to practice and participated, not in team drills, but in some of the one-on-ones and things like that. So they're both getting back out there. Spencer Burford is not going to be having surgery on the hand. Kyle Shanahan said the timetable for him is 3 weeks. The interesting thing for Spencer Burford was he was actually on the side field, full pads, with his hand wrapped, and he was out there running and getting some work in, so good for him. And then we talked about Jacob Cowing. He's been dealing with a hamstring. Tate Martin, hamstring. They were both working on the side field, and they look like they're really close to coming back. So it could be any day for those two guys, and that's exactly what we're hoping, is that they're going to get back and be able to make some plays for this football team. Now, one thing that was interesting is the 49ers signed Pat Elflein, and they signed him in the morning, and then he came out to practice, and he got injured. He injured a calf, and the 49ers did waive offensive lineman Bryson Mays to make room for Elflein, and then now what's going to happen with him? He's off right now, injured. So we'll see what happens, how significant the calf injury is. But the 49ers might have to go back out to the guys they worked out yesterday and potentially move on from Elflein and sign one of these other guys looking for interior offensive line depth. I felt that they needed to improve over what they had with Bryson Mays. So Danny Gray, kept an eye on him, and he did return to practice today. So it was a little bit of a scare, but nothing serious as Gray comes back and works himself back into practice. Also, great news, John Feliciano was back at practice, and he took second team reps at right guard. Dominic Pooney continued to work with the first team ahead of John Feliciano. So that's something to monitor. This was the first time they could have easily inserted John Feliciano back to guard and then put Dominic Pooney behind him, but they're letting this thing roll. It's very eerily similar to what we saw a couple years ago with Spencer Burford, where Daniel Brunskill wasn't healthy. You got him stepping in. You got Spencer Burford stepping in for Brunskill, and then eventually you got the guy making some plays for his football team. So maybe Dominic Pooney has a shot. We'll see what happens. But it was pretty cool to see that Pooney continues to have the types of plays that he's going to have. Now the offensive line in whole, we're talking about Pooney and we're talking about the other guys. The offensive line did pretty good today. I kept an eye on some guys that I wanted to see how good they looked and the work they got. Jalen Moore continues to look pretty good. I was excited about some of his reps. He had a couple tough reps here and there, but held on. He did a pretty good job. And then I thought Nick Zakel did a really good job, whether it was playing center or left guard. I felt like he was doing a good job in both the run blocking and pass blocking. It wasn't elite, but it was solid play from Nick Zakel, which, it's good to see because I don't think anyone was expecting to get any production out of Nick Zakel this season. So it's a great job by the San Francisco 49ers, finding the potential there and getting something out of Nick Zakel. And who knows, maybe he can help this football team. I think the one thing that was noticeable was even when Brock Purdy had time, he didn't always have the open receivers. There was just sometimes that Yedem and Lenore and Charvarius Ward and that 49ers safety group of Gio and Jair Brown did a very good job of locking the 49ers down. And Devondre Campbell and Fred Warner, they were flying around. It was they looked good. There were times that there's just nowhere for Brock Purdy to go with the football, and sometimes he decided to run, and it's because there was just no one open. It's not like a defender was getting close and was going to be able to bring him down. There's just nobody there that was wide open. So it was one of those days, and so the 49ers offensive line definitely made some plays, and Ben Barch and Dominic Pooney were the guys starting at guards, and Nick Zakel, like I said, got some center work in as well. So 49ers were using some backups offensive linemen, but they're stepping up and playing well. Today was a day that the offensive line looked well oiled, was able to pick up some blitzes, looked pretty good, and I was excited about it. Now, we're talking about 49ers offensive weapons. Today was a day I did take a look and a deep look at running back, especially after Kyle Shanahan had mentioned that now we've got a real running back battle at running back two. And so I watched Jordan Mason, I watched Elijah Mitchell, and I will say this: Elijah Mitchell looked really, really good today. I mean, he was making the proper cuts. He was getting upfield. He was elusive in the second level. I mean, he was making the right plays. Now, every run didn't go for positive yardage. I don't want you to think that. None of the running backs had positive yardage on every carry, but there were some times where you just saw the fluidity and the vision and the acceleration on display for Elijah Mitchell. I thought he looked really great. He's having himself a really good training camp. And Jordan Mason made some great runs too. There was a couple times he cut. There was one he cut up the middle and jumped over the top of a defender who was going low and kept running. It was a significant run. Cody Schrader had a couple of really good runs. There was a couple times he got caught trying to go ahead and bounce it outside, and one of those linebackers was able to catch up to him and string the play out. But I thought that Schrader had a couple of runs on the interior that looked pretty good. And then he also caught some passes out in the open field in the flat and was able to make something out of them down the sideline. So Schrader looks like he's developing. Patrick Taylor also had a good run, and it was marred by an offsides penalty on the play, and so that was unfortunate. And so they brought that one back, but I mean, it was right up the middle. It was a nice, huge hole, and that was part of it. The run blocking for the 49ers was giving opportunities to these running backs to get to the second level. They were able to press to the line of scrimmage, make their cut, and go. And when they were supposed to get vertical, they usually did. When they bounced outside, whether it was Elijah Mitchell, Jordan Mason, or Cody Schrader, they got met by Fred Warner or D. Winters or Jalen Graham. And so you just can't bounce it out like that. You got to make sure you get up the field and do what you're supposed to do. And with all the work with the two tight end sets, you got to see some real good blocking from some of the tight ends. And so guys like Eric Saubert were really shining. I thought we got good reps out of Brandon Willis, some good reps out of Cameron Latu. Overall, the tight ends looked pretty good today. Jake Tungus had a couple catches, but he also blocked well. So 49ers tight ends kind of did a really good job in their opportunities. Now, one of the big plays in practice was in move the ball. Brock Purdy found George Kittle over the middle, and he was wide open. There was no one around him. He rumbled for extra yardage. Probably would have been around a 40-yard gain. That was absolutely fantastic. So George Kittle, and Brock Purdy are on the same page. And Brock didn't get a lot of work today, but with the work that he was in, he looked pretty good. When he had open receivers, he found them, but he didn't always have open receivers to go against or to find. So he's got some continued work, but he keeps getting better every single day, and he looks like he's going to be ready to roll. Brandon Allen had himself a really good practice today. He completed pretty close to 11 passes. He just looked comfortable. He looked confident within the pocket. He was able to make some good throws. One was probably the highlight of the day. He rolled to the right and he found Trent Taylor open about 12 yards down the field, and Taylor dove and made the catch along the sideline. It was a fantastic play. Trent Taylor ability to get open and ability to make catches, you can tell this guy understands Kyle's offense and feels comfortable with his role within the offense. So I think that Trent Taylor is proving himself to be an asset to this football team. I can't say he's going to be wide receiver six, but I can tell you that he's playing so good that the 49ers are going to try to keep him around this roster somehow. If that's practice squad, whatever they have to do, Trent Taylor is a guy that you know you can count on as a vet. And Chris Conley made a nice contested catch too. The vets were standing out today at the wide receiver position, and there were other guys that were making plays too. So it is really good to see guys like Trent Taylor, like Malik Turner, like even Darby. He was making a couple plays here and there. Some of those guys, but Conley and Trent Williams especially looked really, really good. I'm sorry, Trent Taylor, not Trent Williams. I don't want you to think that Trent Williams was out there, but it was Trent Taylor, and those guys were doing really good. Now we're going to talk about linebackers for a second, because I did put an emphasis and a focus on watching the linebackers play a little bit. And I thought that we got really good performances out of D. Winters again and Jalen Graham, who were making some plays for the San Francisco 49ers. They continued to get out there and get some stuff going, and they were making some key plays, stepping up and filling in holes, covering backs out in coverage. It was nice to see those guys step up and start making plays. And Jalen Graham had a really big hit, met a guy in the hole, and it was very, very loud. Everyone could hear it. He did a very good job and blew up Cody Schrader. And that's what you're expecting Jalen Graham to do. You're expecting him to elevate his game in the run defense and make himself somebody that the 49ers need on their football team. And I thought he did a good job. Now, D. Winters, I watched him, whether he was playing front side linebacker, which means play side, or he was playing backside, just to see how he was going to handle each situation. And one thing I can tell you, when the play comes to him, he gets downhill in a hurry. And that means he goes to the line of scrimmage and crosses and makes plays behind the line of scrimmage. He looked good in that category. Now, when plays were going away from him, there were times that I felt like he got a little too horizontal and did not stay going downhill and being there for the cutback lane. So I think that he was trying to scrape across, which creates alleys and opportunities for guys to cut back. So that's something that he needs to work on, and I'm sure they're going to go over that over film. Jalen Graham and the front side linebacker in that case, which I believe was Tatum Bethune on that play, did not get up the field and turn that play in. They were slow to read it and slow to get to the line of scrimmage, which made it so D. Winters was trying to work across. But those guys need to work in unison to get this thing down. When you have three linebackers on the field, you have to have the guy that gets up there and turns it in. You may have the middle linebackers got to go make the play, and then D. Winters has got to be there for the cutback. So I thought that all three of those guys had moments. Bethune also chased Schrader out of bounds on one play, knocked him out. He showed a little bit more burst and speed than I had seen Tatum Bethune have, and I watched a lot of Florida State football last year. So those three linebackers were pretty interesting to watch, and I put a focus on watching them, and it was good stuff. Now, Cameron Latu had moments today where he looked good, and then there were some moments where he's going to be criticized. First off, there was a moment where he did not look like he knew exactly where to line up, and maybe that was a problem with communication. We don't know for sure. And yes, there was a communication issue. We don't know what happened with Cameron Latu. He did have two straight catches from Joshua Dobbs in a row. One of them over the middle in tight quarters, catches the ball. I mean, he wouldn't have got very many yards, but it was a check down. He made the play. The second time he makes the catch, he turns upfield, and he doesn't put the ball away right away. Ball gets knocked away for a fumble. And, of course, Cameron Latu, because of the mistakes he made last year, those things are not going to be as forgiving. So he's got to step it up. I think just they went to kicking field goals after that with Jake Moody, and it looked like he was in his head. So I'm hoping that he's going to be able to bounce back. We're seeing moments from Cameron Latu. And I'll say this, watching all the special teams work today, Cameron Latu did pretty good on kickoff and kickoff return. So he still has an avenue to make this team. Has he impressed enough to make this team? No. Has he showed moments where you're like flashes and see the athleticism? You're like, that's the guy right there. But right now, we just haven't seen it consistently. So I don't know what we're going to get from Cameron Latu. I don't know if he's going to be able to make this happen. He needs to have a really good preseason to have a chance to make this team because Eric Saubert looks good. Now, a door could be open because of what's going on with Logan Thomas. We don't know about the injury, but Brandon Willis and Eric Saubert have looked pretty good. And Jake Tongas had a pretty good practice today, too. A couple catches, blocked really well. And so 49ers are deep at tight end, and those guys continue to make plays for this football team. Now, Deommodore Lenoir is got to be one of the 49ers superstars right now in training camp. He is coming on the scene. And if you weren't aware of who Deommodore Lenoir was, NFL, you're going to find out because he looks cool, comfortable, and confident out there on the field. He looks good whether he's playing outside or he's playing in the nickel. You can tell that there's another confidence with him. He's ready to take his game to another level. And when he's out there with Yedem and Charvarius Ward, it is probably the best cornerback group that the 49ers have had that I've seen at training camp. These guys absolutely lock people down. I would love to see the battles of Debo, Ayuk, and Jawan Jennings versus those three guys because I think it would be a money matchup. But they are really good. And Deommodore Lenoir has been that guy making plays, whether that is getting his hands on the football, knocking the ball away, or getting home on a blitz. Deommodore Lenoir can absolutely do it all. Now, some of the defensive line, I watched them work a little bit of their hand fighting. I watched them, work some drills that definitely go into helping them bend the corner, work on their edges, fight against contact. It's called a hoop drill, and so I watched them do it, and I watched them work on it pretty much the entire practice that they were doing it. I just sat there and watched and seen how they were handling it, and I was impressed by the most part with some of the defensive tackles. I thought Evan Anderson did a pretty good job today. I thought that he looked good. I thought Shaquille Brown showed some athleticism. I thought Kalia Davis looked really athletic doing it. My problem with him, and this is the same problem I've had pretty consistently with him, is he still looks a little top heavy when it comes to balance. And so when he's having to fight against that contact, he looks a little unstable. So I think he needs to get a little bit more work on that area. And Evan Anderson was moving the best that I've seen him move within the 49ers training camp. So that's good news. And so those guys are flying around. And then Robert Beal Jr., he hasn't really showed anything when we've got to team to the level that I think people are expecting. But his drill work was pretty good. He actually looked on times extremely athletic like we were expecting and able to bend the corner. That drill allows you to work on your edges, allows you to work through your balance and still be able to use your moves and technique, but also be able to find balance. And so I thought that he did a pretty good job. So this interior defensive lineman did good. And then I thought Bill Jr., Gross Matos, Leonard Floyd, they looked pretty good as well. But I think the 49ers need to decide pretty quickly if guys like Sam Okawanu, if guys like Alex Barrett are going to be answers. If guys like T.Y. McGill are enough depth at defensive tackle as far as veteran depth. Because if you need to get an edge rusher, you might want to do it sooner rather than later. So far, they haven't addressed it, but a lot of teams are starting to meet with edge rushers around the league. The 49ers have to decide on Robert Beal Jr. here pretty quick. So I think he's still got the talent and ability. I just don't think we've seen it consistently with what he's been able to do. So it was exciting. Now, when you're talking about kickoff and kickoff return, this is something that I've gotten to see over a couple of the practices in extent. So I've been there when they're having their extensive practices on kickoff and kickoff return. Today was the most intense that it's been of any of the days. They really ramped it up. Now, as far as kickoff return goes, they're running some tandems together. Debo Samuel and Kyle Juszczyk, which I get the thought process, right? You want Debo running behind Kyle Juszczyk. Your problem is if you see them back, you just kick it to Kyle Juszczyk every time. But it was fun seeing Debo Samuel get the returns. He did have the best returns of any of the players. you can just tell there were creases and opportunities for Debo with his vision, his speed, his acceleration, and his power. He could have had some big time returns for the 49ers. So I like seeing that. Jordan Mason and Elijah Mitchell working together is something that I have been talking about during the offseason since I found out they were going to this kickoff role because running backs and big, fast running backs make a lot of sense. So those guys were a group as well. And then they did the other running back group of Cody Schrader and Patrick Taylor. But they also did a second time where they did it as well. And this is when they did some more work, and it was right in front. And they did a group that had Danny Gray in it. And Danny Gray's speed is just different. When he got to the edge, he got around a would-be tackler and got up the sideline. Now, would he have scored a touchdown? No, he would have been tackled, but it would have been for a good gain. At some point, I would love to see Coach Snyder decide to go with Debo and Debo and Gray. And the reason being, if teams want to not kick it to Debo Samuel, if Danny Gray gets that speed going and he finds a crease, he's gone. So I'd like to see him mix it up. Debo with Danny Gray, Debo with Elijah Mitchell. I think those could be really cool. But kickoff and kickoff return, they're working on the techniques, the drills, setting up the returns. It was really good to watch today. So I thought that the 49ers did a good job of mixing in your special teams. They did about 25, 30 minutes of special teams work today. They did their defensive work, looked really good. A lot of the things, their fits and stuff right in front of us. And then they practiced right in front of us with the 11 on 11. They did the structured 11 on 11. Then they did the move the ball drill where it's more like game situations, down and distance, and setting the ball. So it was, those guys were getting it done. I think as far as like some guys that are starting to really stand out, I think you're starting to see that secondary. Every one of those guys that I mentioned, Yedem, even guys like Renardo Green, Samuel Womack got a lot of work today. I think Womack's was a little hit and miss, but I mean, Yedem, Charvarius Ward, Yammer Lenore, they're standouts. I mean, you know where they're at all times. Leonard Floyd looks the part. Gross Matos has been looking the part. Hargrave is a menace. He's really going to be a problem. And so I think those guys are starting to elevate their game. But with that being said, I think the offensive line, they earned a little bit of respect today. Now, of course, you've got to build on that consistency. But I've seen guys that were making plays and making good blocks that I'm starting to see some of Chris Foerster's work. You're starting to see some chemistry and some guys working together in a rotation. And it's pretty nice to see these guys coming together. So getting Brock Purdy pockets is huge for the 49ers, and that's exactly what the offensive line did today. It was a good day for them. Some players are still going to have to come in there and battle, and if you want to know what I think about the battles, go check out my video I did. It talks all about the battles that the 49ers have right now at training camp and who we think is going to come out on top or where they're at on the depth chart right now, because I think there's a lot that can still change just in the short amount of time before they have to decide on their 53-man roster. So it's going to be a lot of fun. But that was day 8 of training camp. That was the breakdown. Day 9, I'm going to be back out there again watching. And so if you guys have any questions, anything you guys want me to watch, let me know in the comment section down below. I really appreciate you guys watching. Please like and subscribe if you haven't already. If you're listening audio platform, 49ers Cutback on Believe, which is available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen to your podcast. This episode was brought to you by Bet Online. Bet Online, the game starts here. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Until then, stay safe. Remember, the right way is always the 49ers way.